On November 19th, Variety confirmed that Star Trek IV is back in development under the helm of writer-director Noah Hawley. All of the surviving cast from the previous Kelvin timeline movies, including Chris Pine, are expected to return. However, this is but the most recent of several different iterations of Star Trek IV, a movie which was first announced more than 3 years ago. Could it actually move forward and happen this time? Or are there still hurdles to overcome? As you are about to find out, there are. In this video, we will first look back at the earlier versions of the proposed fourth Kelvin timeline Star Trek movie, and why none of them made it to the big screen. Then, we'll see how Noah Hawley's Star Trek IV has to overcome the very same hurdles that sunk those, and how the imminent remerger between Viacom and CBS plays into all of this. Before we begin, if you like the content provided in this video, then leave a like and subscribe, and in the process, make sure to indicate you want notifications on all videos. We'd also greatly appreciate if existing subscribers will take a moment to check that you are still subscribed and that you too get notifications on all videos. In its first version, the fourth Kelvinverse Star Trek movie was originally going to feature Chris Hemsworth reprising his role as George Kirk, headlining alongside Chris Pine's Captain James T. Kirk in a big-budget blockbuster extravaganza. This version of the movie was no mere rumor. It was formally announced to the public on July 18th of 2016, just 4 days prior to the release of Star Trek Beyond. The timing was no coincidence. In general, development of a sequel to any movie will often begin before the current film is released. However, the announcement of a sequel will rarely come until the current movie is in theaters and is a certified hit. That way, the sequel can be quietly scrapped if the current movie bombs without the public ever learning of it. The Star Trek IV announcement deviated from this because it wasn't primarily directed at the movie-going audience or the trades, but at potential investors. At this time, the movie distributor Paramount was something of a bomb factory. They were coming off a string of high-profile flops which had cost their investors a fortune. Star Trek Beyond had also been a very expensive movie. A small fortune had been spent on developing an earlier version of the movie that was scrapped. Then, even more resources had been spent starting over from scratch with a new director, a new writer, and developing the movie from start to release in less than 2 years. It was made even more expensive by last-minute reshoots which introduced Shohreh Aghdashloo as Commodore Paris, commanding officer of Starbase Yorktown. Despite the expense put into Star Trek Beyond, the tracking figures were abysmal. So even before the movie opened, distributor Paramount and production company Bad Robot knew they had another bomb on their hands. Paramount, however, were going to lose much more than Bad Robot. Bad Robot stood to earn much less on the movie if it flopped than if it had been a hit. Paramount and external investors essentially paid for the movie's production, which included paying a production fee to Bad Robot. This meant Bad Robot would still profit from Star Trek Beyond, no matter how badly it performed. Likewise, they would profit from the next film. However, for that to happen, there had to be a next film to profit from. According to rumors that reached us, this is the reason why Star Trek IV was announced prior to the release of Star Trek Beyond. It may have also signaled to audiences that this line of Star Trek is here to stay, so get invested and show up for Beyond. But the primary intention of the announcement was signaling to investors before the hammer fell on Beyond that the next one has Marvel's Thor in it. So investors, don't put away your pocketbook just yet. Keep on writing checks and you'll get your money back next time around. The investors didn't bite, and so the original big-budget blockbuster extravaganza version of Star Trek IV never got off the ground due to lack of funding. This did not stop them from trying. Unrelated to the Chris Hemsworth returns to Star Trek treatment, several other possible treatments were also being developed, any one of which could serve as either Star Trek 4, 5, or 6, depending on how the chips fell. The most well-known of these is Quentin Tarantino's Star Trek. Very little is known about it, other than it would be indeed made under Bad Robot's alternate license. Tarantino told MTV,
"The one thing I can say is it would deal with the Chris Pine timeline. Now, I still don't quite understand, and JJ can't explain it to me. And my editor has tried to explain it to me, and I still don't get it. All right, Fred Raskin, about something happened in the first movie that now kind of wiped the slate clean.
Right.
I don't buy that. I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. I don't. Fuck that. All right, I don't like that. You know.
I'm gonna lead you down a road. You want the Guardian of Forever to have happened, don't you?
Yeah, I want the whole series to have happened. All right, it just hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
And no, Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever his name is. All right, it's not Khan.
Yeah.
All right, Khan is Khan. And I told JJ, I go like, I don't understand this. I don't like it. And then they're like, ignore it. Nobody likes it. I don't understand it. Just do whatever you want. If you want it to happen the exact way it happened on the series, it can.
So that's more in line with what you're honoring the series that you loved and came up with.
Yes, exactly.
Tarantino's Star Trek was never intended to be Star Trek 4. It is also unknown if Tarantino himself would direct or merely produce it, as he has imposed an artificial limit of directing only 10 movies. He has so far directed 9 and may not want Star Trek to be his final film. Tarantino's Star Trek remains in development, but it has no target release date and, as far as we know, no funding. Whatever funding they could get, however, was more urgently needed elsewhere. In April of 2018, Bad Robot tried to sell a repackaged version of Star Trek 4 to investors again. They didn't formally announce the movie, since that had blown up in their face last time. Instead, they leaked to the trades that Star Trek 4 was back on. Chris Hemsworth was still in it. Plus, they added another selling point, a female director in S.J. Clarkson, something which would guarantee positive press and brownie points all around. At the time when this was leaked in April 2018, Bad Robot didn't have the funds necessary to actually make the movie. Their plan was for the press coverage and the surrounding hype to be a part of the pitch to investors, and raise money needed over the next few weeks and months. If Star Trek Beyond had shown anything, it was that there is still demand for Star Trek, and the franchise can still be very profitable. Just not at Star Trek Beyond's price tag, or at the price they had planned for the original big-budget iteration of Star Trek 4. Therefore, this time, they had planned that the movie would have a lower budget. However, they weren't able to raise even the reduced amount they were asking for. They did raise enough that a movie could still be made, but not without even further cuts than planned being made across the board. This also meant that everyone had to accept less money than was previously agreed to in their signed contracts, and none would have to accept bigger cuts than Chris Hemsworth and Chris Pine. As was covered extensively at the time, neither Hemsworth nor Pine would have any of that. Both dropped out. While planted editorials about how Star Trek 4 didn't need Chris Pine were making the rounds in the trades, Star Trek 4 fell apart behind the scenes. The investors that had put money on the table took it back. Star Trek without the selling point of Chris Hemsworth was bad. Star Trek without Chris Pine, whom they had taken for granted would be there, was untenable. Although this never made the press, we heard rumors that other principal cast members also dropped out, and soon, director S.J. Clarkson also moved on. She went on to direct the pilot for Blood Moon, the Game of Thrones prequel series HBO decided to cancel on account of it being too woke. On November 19th, Variety broke the scoop that Noah Hawley had been tapped to write and direct the next Star Trek movie. The article reads, "Though plot details are being kept under wraps, sources tell Variety that the next Star Trek is expected to see Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto, Carl Urban, and Zoe Saldana returning to man the USS Enterprise. J.J.Abrams' Bad Robot will return to produce, with Hawley also producing through his 26 Keys production banner. This will serve as the fourth movie in the cinematic series and is separate from another Star Trek pick that Paramount is developing with Quentin Tarantino producing and Mark L. Smith writing. The studio had tried to launch the fourth film last year with S.J. Clarkson directing and Chris Hemsworth joining the cast to reprise the role of Pine's father. That film was shelved when deals could not be reached, but the studio is hoping that this attempt will be more successful, with a different plot than the one Hemsworth turned down. Let's take a look at what this actually means. To begin with, note that like with the defunct S.J. Clarkson helmed version, this is not a formal announcement. Instead, the studio has fed this news directly to Variety, who even points out that the studio is hoping that this attempt will be more successful with a different plot than the one Hemsworth turned down. What this means is that as of now, Bad Robot and Paramount don't have the funds to make Noah Hawley's Star Trek 4, nor are the cast on board. Sources tell Variety Chris Pine and his crew are expected to be back, which is code for that as of this moment, they have not signed on. About the cast, there are two complicating factors here, one of which is scheduling. Having the entire cast available at the same time may prove challenging for the foreseeable future, as Zoe Saldana has Guardians of the Galaxy on the docket in the next couple of years. Carl Urban may be busy with The Boys for the better part of the next few years as well. While not yet announced, we've heard rumors that internally a third season of The Boys has been greenlit, and Urban has an option for a fourth. Then there is the matter of money. All contracts will have to be renewed, and how they are able to pay will be decided by how much money Bad Robot are able to raise from investors. Because like before, this story being put out there is but a part of the pitch to raise funding necessary to actually make the movie happen. The Hollywood Reporter also published a very investor-friendly piece emphasizing that expectations should be kept in check, but at the right budget levels, Star Trek can still be a very profitable franchise. So, will the investors bite this time? Many a Star Trek fan will receive Noah Hawley with open arms. He is a published novelist, and his TV credits are impressive. He has served as a writer and producer on Bones, but is most known for his work on Fargo and Legion, both of which have given him a lot of goodwill among fans, and rightfully so. He was even writing and directing a Doctor Doom solo movie for Fox, which caused a tremendous amount of excitement within the studio, though that fell apart in the Disney acquisition. Despite his TV credentials, however, potential investors may have issues with his actual film credentials. If it were to move forward, Star Trek IV would only be the second feature film he ever directed. His feature film directorial debut was with Lucy in the Sky starring Natalie Portman, which received negative reviews and harsh criticism for factual inaccuracies. Worse than that, it bombed in its limited release and never saw a wide release. For this reason, the numbers don't give the full picture. However, potential investors will be hard-pressed not to notice that Lucy in the Sky at first glance appears to have lost more than $26 million on a budget of $27 million. Even if Bad Robot are able to raise the money to actually make Noah Hawley's Star Trek IV, they have one more hurdle to overcome, and it's a major one. Paramount has to sign off on it. And from what we've heard, Paramount's new corporate owner wants nothing more to do with Bad Robot. On November 25th, Viacom and CBS announced that they expect the merger to go through on December 4th and begin trading as the reunited Viacom-CBS on December 5th. The majority shareholder is Sherry Redstone, daughter of Sumner Redstone, and from what we gather, she genuinely considers Star Trek to be a family heirloom. We have also heard that she is not a fan of what Bad Robot has done to Star Trek on film, what their offshoot Secret Hideout has done to Star Trek on TV, nor is she a fan of CBS All Access, which is the legacy of Les Moonves, whom she was most decidedly not a fan of. Furthermore, we have heard a rumor strongly suggesting that the deal between Paramount and Bad Robot expired on July 22nd of this year, as that marked the point where 3 years had passed since the release of Star Trek Beyond, and with no new movie being in production. If this is accurate, Bad Robot can still pitch new Star Trek movies to Paramount, and if Paramount were to give the green light, the deal would be back on. However, as of now, Paramount are no longer obligated to outsource development of Star Trek movies to Bad Robot. After the Viacom-CBS remerger on December 5th, the new corporation will have full control over the Star Trek movie rights. After that, they are free to move forward with whichever Star Trek movies they want, with or without Bad Robot producing it. They are still tied up with Secret Hideout for Star Trek on television, but for how long still remains to be seen. For now though, let us know how excited you are for Noah Hawley's Star Trek IV, and if you think it will actually end up getting made, in the comments.